A retired woman opened her mailbox and found a letter threatening to take her home. The reason was 4 windows her own homeowners association had already approved in writing. She had done nothing that any reasonable person would call wrong. She paid her dues on time. She read the rules. She asked permission before she lifted a single tool. And still, the letters kept coming. This is a true story. The names and a few small details have been changed. The events, the orders, and the final figures are matters of public record. It begins about 5 years ago in a quiet townhome community somewhere in the American South. Call her Diane. She was retired, settled, and fond of her small home. She had chosen the neighborhood for its order. Tidy lawns, matching shutters, a board that promised everything would stay nice. For a long time that order suited her. Then her windows began to fail. They were old. They leaked air in winter and fogged in summer. Replacing them was not a luxury. It was maintenance, the ordinary upkeep any homeowner eventually faces. So Diane did the responsible thing. She did not simply hire a crew and start tearing out frames. She went to the association first. Her community, like thousands across the country, was governed by an HOA. That stands for Homeowners Association. When you buy in such a place, you agree to a set of rules called covenants. Those rules often control what you may change on the outside of your own home. Paint, fences, roofs, and, yes, windows. So Diane filled out the request. She drew up a plan. The plan was specific and clear. It described exactly what she intended to install. She submitted it to the board for review as the rules required, and then she waited. The answer came back on paper. One word mattered more than the rest. Approved. That should have been the end of the story. A homeowner asked. The board agreed. The work could begin. In a fair world, the file would close there, and no one would ever speak of it again. Diane took the approval at face value. Why wouldn't she? She had the letter in hand. She hired her installers. The old windows came out. The new ones went in. The work was done properly, and her home was warmer and quieter than it had been in years. Then the board looked at the finished result and decided it did not like what it had approved. Quick pause here. If you have ever dealt with someone like this, you already know the feeling in your chest right now. Dr. A comment with your version and a subscribe keeps these stories coming. All right, back to it. The problem in their eyes was uniformity. Her neighbors' homes had a certain window arrangement. Hers, once finished, did not match in the way the board now wanted. Where some units had 8 windows, her plan had called for 4. The plan had said so plainly. The board had stamped it, approved anyway. But approval, it turned out, was not the same as agreement. Not to this board. They wanted the windows changed. They wanted them to match. And they wanted Diane to pay for the alterations herself. She refused. Not out of spite, but out of simple logic. She had asked. They had said yes. The work followed the approved plan exactly. To tear it out now, at her own expense, would mean paying twice to satisfy a board that had changed its mind. She had the letter. She believed the letter would protect her. The board had a different tool in mind. They began to fine her. The fine was $100 a day. Not once. Not as a warning. Every single day, the meter ran. $100 on Monday. $100 more on Tuesday. It did not stop on weekends or holidays. It did not pause while anyone talked. It simply accumulated quietly like water rising against a door. $100 a day does not sound like a fortune, but days become weeks, and weeks become months. The total climbed past 1,000, then past 5,000. Then it kept going toward $12,000 over a set of windows the association had approved in writing. Diane did not pay. She could not see why she should. And here the association reached for its sharpest instrument. They placed a lien on her home. A lien is a legal claim against property for an unpaid debt. In many states, an HOA can record one against a member's home for unpaid fines and assessments. It clouds the title. It can follow the home into any sale. And in the worst case, an association can move to enforce that lien through foreclosure, the forced sale of the home to satisfy the debt. That was the threat now hanging over Diane. Not a strongly worded letter, not a stern phone call. The genuine documented possibility that she could lose her house. Over windows that came with a piece of paper that said approved. This is the moment the story usually ends in defeat. Most people, faced with that kind of pressure, simply give in. They pay the fines. They tear out the work. They do whatever it takes to make the letters stop. The board counts on it. Fighting an association is slow, expensive, and exhausting, and most homeowners do not have the money or the stamina to last. Diane did not have the money either, so she borrowed it. She took on roughly $30,000 in debt to fund a legal fight. Think about that figure for a moment. She was prepared to risk $30,000 of borrowed money to defend a position she believed was right. It was a gamble. If she lost, she would carry that debt and possibly lose her home as well. The pressure was real and it took a visible toll. She would later describe stress that affected her health and a refinance at a worse interest rate to keep everything afloat. But she had something the board may have underestimated. She had the record. Every step of this dispute had left a paper trail. The original request, the detailed plan, and above all, that one-word answer from the board itself. Approved. The association could change its mind. It could not change what it had already put in writing. And that single document would become the center of everything that followed. Here is where the story turns from a private fight into a public process. Diane took the matter out of the board's hands and into a neutral one. Her path ran first through arbitration. Arbitration is a formal hearing, much like a small private trial. A neutral arbitrator listens to both sides, examines the evidence, and issues a decision. Many HOA covenanters actually require arbitration before a dispute can go further. It is binding, which means the outcome carries real legal weight. In that hearing, the board's case ran into a simple problem. They had approved the plan. The plan was specific. The work matched the plan. There was no document anywhere showing that Diane had agreed to install anything other than what she did. Their entire position rested on a change of heart, made after the fact against their own written approval. The arbitrator sided with the homeowner. But the association did not simply accept it. So the fight moved into the courts, where the same record was laid out again before a judge. And here the documented orders are precise because they are part of the public file. The court directed the association to remove the lien from her home. The cloud over her title was lifted. The threat of foreclosure was gone. The court directed the association to cancel the fines. The nearly $12,000 that had piled up $100 at a time was wiped away. The meter that had run for months simply stopped, and then it was erased. And the court did one more thing. The part that turns a defense into accountability. It ordered the association to reimburse her legal fees, more than $12,000 of them. The homeowner, who had been told to pay, was now the one owed money. The board that had reached for foreclosure was now writing a check. Most stories would end there, on the steps of the courthouse, with the orders read into the record. This one had one last turn. The association did not pay quickly. The reporting describes delay, the money owed but not promptly delivered, the matter dragging on rather than closing cleanly. For a homeowner already stretched thin by borrowed money, that delay was its own kind of pressure. Even after losing, an association can stall, and a tired opponent might still walk away with less. Diane did not walk away. The dispute moved toward a final resolution, and the numbers that closed it are the most striking of all. The matter settled. Under the settlement, the homeowner received $75,000, and she kept her windows. Sit with that figure. She had been threatened over fines of around $12,000. She had borrowed $30,000 to fight, and the dispute resolved with the association paying her $75,000, with her windows still right where she had installed them, exactly as the original plan had described. The very thing the board demanded she remove, she got to keep, and was paid on top of it. The windows that were going to cost her home instead stayed in the wall. The plan the board approved, then attacked, was the plan that stood. Everything she had been told to undo remained done. It is worth being precise about how this ended, because the mechanism is the lesson. Diane did not win because she shouted the loudest. She did not win on sympathy. She won because the record was on her side and because a neutral process, first an arbitrator, then a court, was willing to look at that record and follow it. The approval letter was not just a courtesy. In the hands of a hearing, it was evidence. The fines were not just unfair. Against that approval, they could not stand. The lien was not just frightening. A judge had the power to lift it, and did. That is the quiet machinery underneath this story. An association can fine. It can record a lien. It can threaten foreclosure. Those powers are real and they are heavy, and they are often enough to make people surrender. But they are not the final word. Above the board sits a process that does not care how a meeting voted. It cares what the documents say. There are smaller lessons folded inside the large one. The homeowner herself pointed to one. Document everything. Keep the letters. Save the plans. Write down the conversations. The thing that protected her was not a clever argument, made years later. It was a one-word answer she had kept on file from the very beginning. Approved. She did not create that protection in the courtroom. She created it the day she asked permission and kept the reply. And there is a harder truth in here too, one the story does not hide. Winning was expensive. It cost her borrowed money, lost sleep, and a real strain on her health. She refinanced at a worse rate to survive the fight. She has said she intends to leave that kind of community behind entirely. Justice arrived, and the figures landed in her favor. But it took roughly 5 years, and it took more out of her than any board should be able to demand. The system worked. It simply worked slowly and at a cost. Still, the final ledger is clear, and it is the kind of ledger this channel exists to read aloud. A board changed its mind and tried to make a homeowner pay for it. They fined her toward $12,000. They liened her home and raised the word foreclosure. And when a neutral process finally weighed it all, the fines vanished, the lien lifted, her fees came back, and she walked away $75,000 ahead, windows intact. She had asked permission. She had kept the answer. And in the end, that single piece of paper outlasted every threat the association could send. Somewhere in a quiet community in the American South, the windows are still there. They let in the light, the way windows are meant to. And the woman behind them is the one who got to decide they would stay. Justice, served quietly. If that landed the way it should have, do me a small favor and tap like. Subscribe to Quiet Justice so the next story finds you, and tell me in the comments how you would have handled it. I will see you in the next one.